Oh man, guys. Oh man. We just got the whiteboard video on Midnight, the definitive statement on what Midnight is at least currently intended to be. And it's looking like our future is going to be very dusty. If you're looking forward to collecting those fat bags of dust, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. All right. All right. Thank you for joining, everyone. Let's see who we've got here. Eric Williams, let's go. Neo Chad, yes, second. Mission Zambia, good morning. Good morning. Oh, thank you. You left the midnight whiteboard video. Well, you're in luck because we are going to cover it for sure. Jay Marie says, just watched the whiteboard video and bro, I'm a tech normie and I understood clearly how important and amazing midnight is and will be. Let's go. Yep, let's go. Yep, I'm hoping this is going to be moon dust that will help us with the moon Lambos, all of those things. Daniil Wiggins says, man, back to the darker headlines. This one, though, is meant in a positive way. This one is meant to be very, very positive, actually. Fly Over Me says, dust me off. Fly Over Me also says, we'll be staking my night and loaning my dust. Taz says, hey, peoples, are we excited about Midnight? I love the Whiteboard 2 Electric Boogaloo presentation. Fired up. Yep, I agree. Hola, Rulo. Bindocam says, to horse, lads. Dingo Star Max, what's up? Thanks for joining. Thank you for joining. Flying Hambone. Oh, thank you for that. I think you're talking to me. Maybe you're talking to somebody else, but if to me, thank you for saying that. Coop to Scoop, KC says, I'm pumped. Me too. I'm also pumped. What's up, James? Good to see you. What's up? David M. Jensen, thank you for joining. Brian Packard, good evening. Spooky Tech is here. Jose Cano is here. Whiteboard 2.0. Let's go. Welcome. Cardano Universe says, welcome, Midnight Riders. We're going to talk about the naming of this community. We're going to cover that. James says, I'm psyched. I can do Lost and Found Phase 3. There you go. Yep. Charles even talked about it in the whiteboard video. Flying Hambone. Yo, AOS. He says, yo, AOS. You're saying you, AOS. My post. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Bindocam says, I'm running out of ways to say let's go in older English dialects. You can go to other languages too if you want to. You can go to other languages. Try not to make it too obscure though. Because I probably won't know what you're saying if it's too obscure. Chaos Ensued says fresh from the Midnight Mines. So yeah, before we jump into the video, obviously we're going to cover the Midnight whiteboard, the whiteboard 2.0. I'll just call it whiteboard 2.0. We're going to cover that. Okay, good. Oh, Cardano Universe saying finally a podcast that knows how to turn up the mic volume. Yeah, let me know. Let me know if the controls on this mic can sometimes result in me accidentally turning it down. So let me know if I'm ever too quiet. I appreciate that. Or if sometimes I might get too far. My mic discipline might not be too good, so I might get too far from the mic sometimes. Let me know. Sub-Zero, thanks for joining. Before we jump into the whiteboard video, which is the main thing we're going to talk about, pretty much the only thing we're going to talk about tonight, I will say this. I stayed up late last night. All of a sudden, I realized I need to use Patty and Paul's bot farmer, and just kind of because we discussed it, I felt like I should actually use it and jump in and tell you guys about the experience for anybody who hasn't tried it yet. I know some of you have already tried it, and you probably already know, but I thought I should, since I talked about it so much, and I was so glad they open sourced that. I thought it was so cool they open sourced it. I thought the least I could do was jump in, stay up late last night, get it running and use it. Problem I've mentioned before, I do not run an operating system that was susceptible to natively running the bot funners, the bot miners they put up. I did run the browser version, right? And I think I had the same experience. Probably a lot of you have run the browser version that they open sourced, and so you know what that's like. But I thought I should also run I should figure out how to run either the Windows or the Linux bot miner. I keep saying bot miner. So what I did is I went to Google Cloud Platform. I created a Windows virtual machine, Windows 2025 server, and I went through the whole process of kind of researching processors, figuring out what I should do, because the processors are, you have to, there's a little bit of matching. You kind of figure out a little bit of matching to figure out like what their processor designations would correspond to in the normal world, like the kind of processors we would get in our retail laptops. So there's a little bit of research there, but eventually I did find I did this several times. So I set it up several times, and eventually I found a 16 core C4D processor, which is like an AMD Turin processor with 62 gigabytes of memory and 16 virtual cores. And it ran much better than the browser. I don't think any of you will be surprised to hear that this was much more productive than my browser experience. So the browser has kind of, at least for me, maybe the same for some of you, the browser experience is kind of, you can tell it's kind of grinding to a halt. The momentum is, slowly disintegrating on the browser mining. The browser mining is becoming less and less productive as the difficulty ramps up. And so today, while I still kept my browser mining running just for comparative reasons. And, I was producing, a solution here and there. But immediately when I got on this 16 core virtual Windows machine and I got the Patty and Paul's bot mining software up there, immediately it started producing like, about 10 solutions an hour, which is great given how few my browser miners are producing right now. So it only made me like, it only made me sort of like dream about what it must have been like to be running, that same system on day one when the difficulty was so much lower. And obviously there's people, I was only running like 16 miners simultaneously. Learn Cardano was saying my midnight browser mining is dead. 7+ hours, no results. Yep. Unless you've got a pretty fast processor, you're going to be having some difficulties. Unless you got, a lot of cores, you're going to be having some difficulties. Yeah, the bot miner is definitely working. I also did try, so I set it up several times. First, I set it up with, I tried several different sort of tiers of available processors in Google Cloud Platform. So I tried with 2 cores, nothing. The same thing a lot of you are talking about, like no solutions. I ran it for quite a while, no solutions. Then I tried an 8-core processor, and it was, it was okay. I mean, not really okay. I think it produced like 1 solution in like an hour. So then I switched over to the 16-core processor. And the cost on these, if you're getting frustrated with your browser mining, the cost on this was not very much. Like obviously I haven't gotten the bill yet, but they claimed they were charging me about $1.75 an hour. And that can be much, much cheaper. It can be like, I think it was like almost half the price if you ran Linux as opposed to Windows. I just chose to run Windows just, to see what it was like, basically. But Linux could be even cheaper. So at $1.75 per hour, if that ends up being the true cost, I'm trying not to underestimate the possibility that I get the bill for this and it's much more than I expect. That's very possible because it's the first time I'm using a virtual machine on Google Cloud Platform. And I also had to, another little caveat here and a little detail is, at first, because I was a new account on their platform, they would only allow me up to 12 cores. And the only options were 8 or 16 cores. So it was that nice little marketing trick where they're like, well, you're allowed 12, but here are your options, 8 or 16. So I actually had to like petition Google Cloud Platform to allow me to have 16. So I had to actually send them a message and explain to them what I was going to do with the 16 cores. And they immediately granted me the expansion in my allowed cores. But I actually had to write out what I was doing with it. Of course, I didn't write out like, hey bros, I'm trying to do some crypto mining here. Please give me more cores. I just said, I needed more, sort of like multi-thread computation for a brief 6-day experiment. So if anybody tries to do this on Google Cloud Platform, that was sort of my template for getting them to allow me 16 more cores. I'm sure some of you are like, have been using it for a while and you already have, many more cores than they would allow me. I'm sure that's the case for some of you, but if you're brand new to this and you try it out, that's the template I use to get the additional cores. Another problem I ran into is you might see there's a couple things. So you might run into a what was it? There's a little, you might run into a thing where your hash engine, as you try to install this on a Windows server, at least on Google Cloud Platform, you might run into a little problem where your hash engine doesn't quite start up, and you'll get this log, this like constant loop where it says it's waiting for the hash engine. Right before you got that, you probably got a little dialog box saying there was some problem with a little program called, what's it called? VC runtime. VC runtime, what is it? 140.dll. If you just Google the name of that program, you're going to find a million links to the Microsoft page where you can update that program. You can get a newer version of that program. I had a lot of problems trying to set this up late last night into the wee hours of the morning. And finally, I figured out that was the problem. So I downloaded the latest version of that program from Windows into my virtual machine that I was running on Google Cloud Platform. And that instantly solved all my problems. And then Patty and Paul's bot farmer instantly worked. So for whatever it's worth, if anybody tries to do the same thing, that's what I did. And it's working much better than the browser mining I was doing. So I don't know if that's helpful to anybody, but I thought I had a duty to at least try it out since I talked about it. Okay, on to the main event. Doesn't dusty mean bad? Normally it does, but in this case, it very much does not mean bad. In this case, it's more like, it's sort of like pennies are no longer going to be minted as of what it was yesterday. They're no longer minting pennies because they cost, so much more to mint than they're actually worth. In this case, it's more like each little tiny particle of sand is sort of replacing those pennies. That's the hope anyways. We're going to talk about it, but the hope is that those are not particles of sand. Those are pennies and maybe even eventually dollars that will be flying all around us. That's my hope. That's my big hope, but we're going to find out. Sub-Zero says having to restart the session to not get timed out, or I don't know, the problems are too hard. Yep, the difficulty ramped up massively. So probably both things. Binocam says 3/4 of my browsers are getting 2 to 3 solutions behind before end of day. We're about done, so I'm fine if it does piddle out. Yeah, I think a lot of people will just sort of retire as the difficulty gets too hard and they're not getting any solutions. They'll, a lot of people just kind of retire from mining, and that'll be the end of our mining, our early Bitcoin miner LARPing experience. But if you want to try out the sort of IP bot farming, even if you don't have access to the right operating systems, you can do what I did too. Okay. Mr. iWebco DMS says, hello, AOS family. Charles' latest whiteboard video regarding midnight was the closest to crypto tech porn I have ever seen. The most uplifting, hopeful display of tech bursting forth after years of thought. Yep, my thoughts exactly. So let's jump into it. So the first thing I noticed about the video was exactly what Mr. iWebco DMS just said, and this is a delighted Charles. You can tell just from this image right here. This is a delighted Charles who has spent, many years trying to think up how he would do Cardano 2.0. What does he need to incorporate in Cardano 2.0? What does it need to include? What should it not include? How can he get ahead of the pack? This was like a proud father who had spent, devoted the last 10 years of his life to first Cardano and then figuring out how to create Cardano 2.0 in a much more powerful, I don't even want to say more powerful way, just what would the optimal Cardano 2.0 look like? He looked very, very happy. And as we go through his videos, I mean, this was classic Charles whiteboard video. So he sort of runs us through the important parts of crypto history. And I think he encapsulated it perfectly. He said, here's what we got. 2009, we got Bitcoin. It was basically just value transfer. And, he explains, a little bit of the genius, how good that style of value transfer is. And then he goes to 2013 when we got Ethereum and smart contracts. At the time, I was around when this happened. I was around during the Ethereum ICO, as a, just a regular retail participant in crypto, but I was still around very eagerly watching everything happen in crypto. And I think one of the biggest mistakes in crypto, I'm not the first person to say this, but the first time I heard it, I knew this person was right. One of the biggest mistakes in crypto was back in those days. It's not that crypto invented this term, smart contracts, right? It had been in use to describe, various things, but we shouldn't have used that term because it doesn't very accurately describe what smart contracts are. It sort of described one use case of smart contracts. I think they really should have called them smart locks, right? Smart locks, because that's what you're really doing. It's really locking, it's preventing, it's a set of conditions for assets to go somewhere else, to open the door so the assets can go somewhere else, do something else. I think throughout the years, there's been a lot of confusion. People don't really understand what smart contracts are. If we would have called them smart locks, I think it would have made more sense. So now that term is so ubiquitous that, it'll never change now. And everybody inside crypto knows what it is. But when I talk to somebody new to crypto and I start calling them smart contracts, I can see their eyes glaze over. Anyways, 2013 was smart contracts. Then in 2015, we had, from Charles's perspective, the addition of scalability, interoperability, and governance. This was Cardano, which has now become one of the world's largest DAOs. Charles points out at its peak had a market cap of over 100 billion. We've held on to 20 billion. Scalability is the piece that's still coming. We've got Hydra right now, as we covered last night in the video. Delta DeFi is running on Hydra on mainnet. So Hydra is a real thing, full of utility on Cardano mainnet right now. And we've got Laos, which is input endorsers coming in 2026. We've definitely got governance. Cardano is one of the world's largest DAOs. Interoperability in crypto, we also got interoperability. We got things like bridges, we got TradFi on ramps, especially recently. We got a lot of TradFi on ramps, a lot of interoperability with TradFi. But Charles thinks we need one more generation, one more. So those were the 3 generations of crypto. We need one more generation of crypto before we can onboard billions. So this is obviously Midnight. Midnight is going to be the 4th generation. And he thinks there are certain pillars to the whole 4th gen thing. He thinks those pillars are rational privacy, identity, and cooperation. So I think we all expected privacy and identity. The cooperation piece is a little more subtle, but it makes sense the way he lays it out here. So the interesting thing, there's a lot more of a focus on Midnight as a layer 2 to everyone. So we'll get into the details of that, but there's a much bigger interoperability and cooperation piece, bigger focus on those things in Midnight than you would expect, because of course, a lot of people have been just talking about Midnight as this, like very advanced privacy chain, involving, zero knowledge proofs. And of course, that's the, 10-second pitch for Midnight. But really, these other pieces having to do with the cooperation and the identity piece are a lot bigger than I thought going into this video. So when he says rational privacy, he points out that every organization, every entity, every party in the world has private data and public data, right? He gives many different examples of this, but even as an individual in a society, you think, when you drive around whatever town, city, countryside you live in, you know, you're very public about certain things. If you drive to the market, people might see what color your car is. They might see what kind of clothes you're wearing. They might see, how tall you are. They might see, what color your hair is. These are all private things that are going to be inherently private if you're going around in society. But there are other things that you don't necessarily want everybody in the market to see. You don't have any preference for them to know how much money is in your bank account, whether or not your significant other was mad at you last night and forced you to sleep on the couch, things like this. These are things you don't want the public world to know about. So even as an individual, we have certain public data about us that's on display for the entire world, and there's certain private data about us that we don't get any utility out of the world knowing those things, and in fact it's sort of a disutility to us. So he points out that blockchains are already the public side of that. Blockchains are very valuable in their transparency, but the transparency is also a double-edged sword, because everything you buy online, everybody knows. If you buy certain things, everybody knows, oh, that address, it's pseudonymous, so they don't necessarily know who owns that address, but they know that address has been buying, the naked lady NFTs, whatever it is you're into. The entire blockchain can know that if they want to, right? So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. So Charles talked about the amount of time and effort that went into Kachina. You've heard him mention this over the years, to use ZK proofs to prove something without revealing that thing. We've talked about this many times on this channel, how, I think the great explanation of this is, your daughter, your 22-year-old daughter is with you at the restaurant, or let's say it's your girlfriend. It's your 22, you're 22 and your girlfriend's 22. You're at the restaurant. She needs to prove to the creepy waiter that she's old enough to drink a glass of wine that she's about to order. But both you and her don't want the creepy waiter to know her address, which is on her driver's license or her passport, right? ZK proofs can help solve this. They can help her, if she were in a digital environment, they could help her to prove she's over 21 and just prove that piece without providing her entire ID that has her address on it. Not only that, but she can prove she's 21 without proving exactly how old she is. Because the creepy waiter doesn't need to know she's 22. He doesn't need to know if she's 30, 40, 50. He just needs to know she's 21. So she can prove things like that without having to reveal the exact data. She can just prove she has the data without even providing the data. So the next piece he focused on with regard to Midnight is this thing they're calling Nightstream. And he says this is really the heart of Midnight. This was pretty interesting because I hadn't heard any detail on this previously. So Nightstream involves tensor codes, which will be a way to future-proof Midnight. So the Midnight will be able to use things like the newest hardware technology being developed by companies like NVIDIA in the future. Because if they just built out Midnight to use, the current ZK proof systems based on elliptic curves it's launching with, those are Plonk and Halo 2. If they just did it that way and nothing else, then when those ZK proof systems are outmoded or the latest hardware isn't compatible with those, Midnight wouldn't be able to make use of the newest hardware without upgrading its ZK proof systems. Tensor codes are going to make this possible for for Midnight over time to migrate to even a post-quantum scheme that can take advantage of things like the latest GPUs for compute. So this is very interesting. Charles says this is a massive innovation. Don't ask me how tensor codes accomplish all that. I'm sure if you Google tensor codes, you're going to get, or you ask AI, you're going to get a 10x better explanation than I could give you right now. But I myself will also be researching this because I think it's interesting. So we also have known for a long time that Midnight's programming language is this programming language called Compact, which is basically a DSL of TypeScript. It's based on TypeScript. TypeScript, is, we've talked about it many, many times in the past, from the very first announcement of, Midnight, when they first announced that Midnight was going to be a thing, we talked about TypeScript because it's just a statically typed JavaScript, which is great because JavaScript is one of the most widely adopted distributed programming languages. So, of course, one of the big gripes about Cardano back in the day was that not a lot of people knew Haskell. And, we've had a lot of developers we probably owe quite a debt of gratitude to who have developed other programming languages for Cardano. I think we owe them a lot for doing that. But very happy to see that Midnight is not repeating the same mistake. And when I say mistake, there was good and bad to it. Like we got a huge amount of security by using functional programming language like Haskell. A lot of good things about it, but wide adoption was not one of those great things. So the next pillar is identity. And you remember identity has been something we talked about, a lot in Cardano. Going all the way back to the Atala Prism days. Like identity was going to be a big deal when we were talking about the Africa thing, that eventually we discovered it was about Ethiopia and the Ministry of Education, and they were trying to do a big thing involving identity, and Tala was a thing we knew about. But it turns out that W3C promulgated some digital identity standards. So the whole space has kind of moved to W3C DIDs. And with the current DID standards, you can give a unique identity to anyone, including things like humanoid robots, AIs, whatever. Pretty much anything you want to have an identity can have a digital identity. And those digital identities can be seamlessly integrated into smart contracts. So this obviously is going to enable a lot of the things we're going to want to do in Midnight. Yep, I agree. Haskell was not a mistake, but it came with a price. And the price was that it's not as widely adopted as some other programming languages. But I agree. I mean, one of the big themes of this channel, for a lot of years was talking about the benefits of Haskell. So I agree with you. Mr. iWebCode DMS says, I foresee a modular architecture regarding ZK proof hardware such that the more HP you plug in, the more puzzles you can solve faster, think has power, or the increase in ZK proof complexity. I think things are going to get wild when everybody starts transitioning to sort of a post-quantum future. Things are going to get really wild, and the complexity is going to, go up probably. Let's see. Mr. iWebCode DMS says they could coexist in the Midnight network, but the ZK builders with the most powerful tech get more rewards. Okay. So once we have this combination though of the privacy and the digital identity, you could have things like DEXs that have an unregulated side and a regulated side. So, and a lot of the discussion, of course, one of the biggest themes in Midnight is that it has this duality, shielded, unshielded, public, private. Charles spends a lot of time talking about those two things. But you could have a DEX that has a regulated side and an unregulated side, because these DEXs are on the internet, and the internet is, the internet is international. So we're dealing with many, many different jurisdictions. Yeah, Eric Williams says, I remember AOS trying to learn Haskell. Yeah, I went through about 600 pages. I read every word and did every single exercise in that gigantic Haskell book that people sometimes talk about, the one that's like 1,200 pages long. I went through about half of it and did every single exercise. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it, especially the first chapter on lambda calculus. If you want to learn something interesting, lambda calculus is pretty interesting, and it does a very good job of teaching it to you. Like I was shocked how well it taught me lambda calculus. Don't ask me to do anything with lambda calculus today because that was a while ago, but I felt pretty good about it by the time I got done with that first chapter on lambda calculus. And then you jump into Haskell proper, and it's very interesting. So obviously, we've got various types of regulation. A gentle introduction to Haskell. Yeah, you're probably you're probably familiar with that book if you know to make that joke, because it is not. The lambda calculus chapter was great. The rest of the book, yeah, not definitely not a gentle. 600 pages of that book is not a gentle introduction to Haskell. Yeah, I think that's the name of the book. I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's the actual name of the book. Something like that. I looked through a bunch of them, and there was a simpler one, and then there was the very, very long one, but that might have been the title of it even. It's been a while. It's been years. Anyways, so we could have a DEX that has an unregulated and a regulated side. And on the unregulated side, you could just use the DEX like normal, right? Where you deposit your assets just like you normally would. And then the DEX could also have a regulated side where you deposit not to the normal deposit address, but to this sort of pending address. So it'd be kind of like this waiting room on the regulated side, which would trigger a call to midnight to check your digital identity and then return an approval on compliance. So if you're somebody that has if you have a digital identity that proves you're from a jurisdiction where Uniswap doesn't have to do anything, then you could just use the unregulated side. If you are from a jurisdiction that has a bunch of compliance requirements, then you just send your decentralized identity and Midnight does the check for Uniswap, and Midnight basically as a network can be the compliance department for this DEX. You could have radically different compliance checks for users in different jurisdictions, and the DEX just sees a yes or a no as to compliance. It's like this person is in a completely unregulated jurisdiction, they can just use the unregulated side. If they're in a jurisdiction that requires, certain compliance, then Uniswap knows that, and they don't have to deal with it at all. For them, it's just a deposit and some information about, what kind of compliance applies to this person. So this is kind of interesting because I think what we all know is that there have always been things going on in crypto that were of questionable compliance, right? It's like there was a time when we had all kinds of synthetic equities trading on DEXs in crypto. And even now, with the most crypto-friendly SEC we've ever had, just yesterday, we had this awesome new token taxonomy come out from the new head of the SEC. And the one thing he said is, by the way, even though I know you guys are all going to love this whole token taxonomy, just remember, you cannot do synthetics. You cannot do synthetics of things that are obviously securities like NVIDIA stock. You cannot do that and then expect those tokens to be exempt from all the normal securities rules. Those are still securities. So, this is something that's going to happen. We can't have Wild West of DEXs, even though we're in this very crypto-friendly environment. It's not going to be the Wild West. You're not going to be able to trade. You're not going to be able to trade NVIDIA stock as a synthetic on a DEX with no compliance. right? It's like the SEC is not going to let that go on. So there's going to be compliance is going to come to DeFi. It has through enforcement actions in the past. They basically just scare everybody with enforcement actions. And then that particular DEX would have to fight for its life for like years, you know, if they didn't want to pay gigantic fines. I think it's not going to be that kind of an enforcement nightmare necessarily, not under this SEC at least. But compliance is going to come in, you know, some form, whether friendly or not. Rulo 13 says programming 3 mid 90s at uni. My 386 could run a bubble sort for like 5 minutes before crashing. I remember the 386 days. I was so happy. I was so happy when I got my hands on a 486. I was so happy when I got a 486. I felt like that was the most advanced device I had ever seen when I got when I got access to a 486 in the 90s. I remember those days well. AOS, maybe we could take a few minutes for therapeutic purposes and just complain about the CF. Insert clenched teeth, angry emoji here. Let's stay on the positive side. Let's stay on the positive. Today's a positive day. Today was the launch of the Midnight Whiteboard 2.0 video. This is a positive day. We should stay on the positive side of things. How is the CF so hostile to the most important development in the Cardano community in years? How does that advance adoption, awareness, or any other metric we care about? If you mean Midnight, I mean, well, largely they're not a part of it, right? I mean, they're not really even a part of Midnight. They've been, you know, they have no role in Midnight really, at least as a foundation. So, you know, I mean, that's one reason why they would be hostile. I actually haven't seen anything that they've said or not said about Midnight, so I don't know what the reaction is to Midnight at all. But yeah, I mean, they've been kind of, you know, they're not a part of it, so I can see why it would be they'd be less than you know, less than happy about it. Maybe, I don't know, or indifferent. I would hope they would just be sort of indifferent, but you know, I can understand. I can understand why. Um, so interestingly, Charles also says, so it's gonna be the point I'm trying to get to is this is gonna be very smooth for the DEX. They're just gonna see a yes or no as to compliance and very easy for them. And you could also bake in, according to Charles, you could also bake in things like tax payments. He says some jurisdictions like India charge a percentage tax on crypto transactions directly, and you can embed that tax directly into Midnight as it deals with the compliance pieces, which is pretty interesting because I think DEXs do not want to be in a position where they have to take care of the administrative taxes involved with remitting basically like sales tax on, you know, swaps inside the DEX. They don't want to do that. But if Midnight can be sort of this middleman to make that happen for the DEXs, that's a pretty big use case. If you can be the person, if all of a sudden, you know, these DEXs all get to the point where they have to remit taxes on transactions, and you have this sort of middle layer that can do that for them, that's a pretty big use case. That's pretty valuable. Rulo says, I feel something is broken for good now. This week was weird. Cardano and Midnight are linked, but they will evolve in very different ways. Yeah, this is a pretty big fork in the road in Cardano. It's this week, I don't think I even fully appreciated how big a fork in the road this is. You know, I knew IOG was spending. It was obvious just from what was publicly released how much energy Charles and IOG were putting into Midnight, but I didn't realize what a big fork in the road it is. Midnight is, you know, I don't hesitate to say Midnight is kind of Cardano. It's not Cardano 2.0, but it's this brand new direction. What I would say is Cardano plus Midnight is Cardano 2.0. And it's sort of like, hey, you know, we tried to optimize Cardano 1.0, but there's a whole bunch of brand new stuff going into Cardano 2.0, which is Cardano plus Midnight. And it really looks like the most important part. It really looks like Cardano without Midnight is going to be a very different thing going forward than Cardano 2.0, which is sort of this Cardano plus Midnight. I maybe not very eloquently put, but I hope you get what I'm saying. Mr. Webco DMS says CF has really spilt milk, as Charles would metaphorically say. He's moved on, and I guess we should, as a community. Let's hope in the future they surprise us with incredible relationship news. Yeah, I mean, them being cut out of something that everybody's so excited about. I hope what actually happens. I hope what actually happens is it just lights a fire and they do some incredible stuff that we're all really proud of. That's what I hope for the CF, that over the next couple of years, this sort of like just opens up the runway for them to pull off some incredible partnerships and to do some incredible stuff that we're all really happy about. That's what I hope for the CF. Streetwise says the CF resides in an extremely conservative jurisdiction. Agreed. Where it is safer for them to earn ADA rewards in the treasury than it is to reward actual ADA holders by carrying out their mandate. So I will definitely agree with that extremely conservative jurisdiction part. Maybe I missed it, but do we know when Night might hit exchanges? We'll need more. Yeah. So what's going to happen is after the scavenger mine, there's going to be the actual, melting part of the glacier drop where the glacier melts. It's going to melt in 25% tranches. So on some day, once that, melting part of the glacier drop starts, there will be a random day between 0 and 90 days, basically, where we'll get that first 25% tranche. And then if I remember correctly, the 3 subsequent 25% tranches will all happen exactly 90 days from whatever that first random day is. So, I mean, that's when Midnight is basically going to hit all of our wallets. So I assume that's when there will be, when people start trying to inject that into the exchanges. So I don't know though. Who knows? Who knows? I don't know how it's going to work with the exchanges. Yes, Cardano 2.0 indeed. Yeah. I mean, yeah, this could have gone very differently too. Charles could have said, you know what? Knight's not even going to be a Cardano native token. It's going to be its own blockchain. We're not even going to call it a partner chain. And Midnight alone, Midnight by itself is Cardano 2.0. I'm throwing all my energy into that and I'm done with Cardano. That could have happened too. That could have easily happened too. So I'm very thankful that Cardano 2.0 turned out to be Cardano plus Night. So I'm happy this is the way it turned out, because that, if a lot of other founders could have easily chosen that other path. So I'm very thankful that Charles did not choose that path. Brand new direction for IOHK. Yeah, I think you're going to see IOHK. I mean, they're shooting their energy into Midnight for sure. So, I mean, obviously we just gave them a bunch of money to build out, in my mind, I mean, to do a lot of different things, but in my mind, the big one is to build out input endorsers. So a lot of things, a lot of other things packed into that budget, but they've still got a lot of work to do on Cardano. So they're still going to be spending a lot of time, but I think the sort of spiritual energy, if you will, the psychological energy is going to be, I think that the part that's going to be very exciting to them right now is going to be Midnight. Did I hear right in the talk that IOG spent 100 million on Midnight? Can anybody verify that? I can't remember hearing that, but yeah, if anybody can verify that for at Cardano, I'd be interested to hear the answer to that as well. Lobster claws, yeah. Otis Frichov, lobster claws now on ADA and Night. Exactly, that's how I feel. Definitely do not get lobster trapped on your Night either. Definitely do not lose your Night by getting lobster trapped. Midnight can be thought as a layer on top of Cardano. Yeah, I think so. Without Cardano, Midnight cannot work as of now anyway. Anyhow, true, very true. I mean, the Night token is required to generate dust, and we'll talk about that. And the Night token lives on Cardano. It's a Cardano native token, so they're intrinsically linked, to borrow the language from the Clarity Act. Okay. B117 says, after watching the whiteboard video, I should have mined much harder, need more night. Yeah, that was part of why, you know, I started the bot mining last night, just sort of as an experiment, so I could tell people how hard or easy it is. The answer is it's pretty easy. You can definitely, if I can figure it out, you all can figure it out if you wish to. Yeah, I kind of felt like, it's like sort of conflicted though, because the allocation we got in the Glacier drop as ADA holders, if you held significant ADA, was so much more significant than the amount you can mine. It's kind of crazy. So super glad to have had that and not have to mine like crazy to get that same amount. But it does, hearing about midnight did make me really happy. I set up that bot miner. Makes me happy to get those additional night tokens. Brian Packard says midnight is just the start of the partner chains. Yeah, that's an important topic not to forget. It sounds like the plan is for us to get a lot of partner chains, and hopefully they're all airdrops just like this one. I'll be very happy to, get an allocation just like this for the additional partner chains. That'll be great. It's a great reason, a great benefit to holding ADA. I think, even though we have no idea how much they're going to be worth. So, oh, BindoCam says, I believe it's individual, so some will be day 1, others can be day 90 after launch. Oh, is that how it works? Is that how it works? I didn't even. That makes more. Yeah, that makes it much more like a glacier melting. That makes it much more like a glacier melting. So, that is, yeah, that does a much better job of us all not, that makes total sense, because that does a much better job of keeping us all from hitting the exchanges with our 25% tranches on the same day. So if everybody is randomly on their own schedule, that makes much more sense. Thank you for pointing that out. So if midnight is as great as Charles and some other people say it is, will it count in the TVL? I know you don't care about that, but Wall Street does. I mean, DeFi Llama doesn't seem to do us any favors. So I don't think they're going to be like, hey, here's the TVL for the greater Cardano ecosystem. I think they're going to be like, here's the Cardano TVL, here's the midnight TVL. And then everybody's going to be like, midnight is now much bigger than Cardano if it has a larger TVL. I mean, that's how I think that narrative is going to play out. But we'll all know what's actually going on the inside here. We'll know what's up. We'll know they're intrinsically linked. Mr. iWebCodeMS says, I like to think of OSI model of networking where Cardano is lower layer, handling just basic transactional integrity, whereas higher layers. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole point of, that's the whole beauty of like the layerverse model, because we obviously have, so I think everybody realizes this, but we obviously are pretty far out on kind of the security leg and the decentralization leg of the trilemma. Scaling, not so much. Not so much. We went for robust integrity, security, ruggedness, reliability. And the beautiful part of the layerverse model is that with other layers in the layerverse, with that bedrock of fundamental security, we can make other compromises on all the other layers. We can have layers that are extremely fast, like Hydra state channels. And they're super cool if they are isomorphic, because the same logic will work in the state channel as works on the base layer. So we can have layers like that where we don't care about decentralization, because there's some things where we probably don't care about decentralization, some little niche use cases where we don't care about it at all, but we can still have the very, very high ruggedness and decentralization on the base layer. So yeah, I think that's right. Ada Eclipse says, I think he said 20 million on midnight. I remember I talked about something. There was some 20 million figure they spent on something we talked about last night or the night before. Oh, it was they spent Was it 20 million they spent on K framework? Was it K framework or something around that they spent 20 million on? Maybe he repeated a similar figure for Midnight in this video. Was spilt milk Charles throwing shade on the CS Danone deal? That would be hilarious. I I don't think that would be Charles's style. Charles seems to respect big global brands. He respects their economic power. So I don't think he would throw shade on the Danone deal. I don't think that's what I covered that on this channel. I covered that on this channel, the deal, but I don't think that'd be Charles' style. Cardano is still the main kingdom, but Midnight is expanding the kingdom. Yeah, Midnight is definitely a brand new land in the kingdom. That's for sure. And yeah, it seems like IOG is moving a lot of its troops over into that land for sure. Slow drip. Yep. That makes perfect sense. Thank you for pointing that out. That makes perfect sense, BinoCam. Yeah, so don't donate it all to the same wallet or all be on the same schedule. Yeah, that's kind of a huge benefit. If you do have a ton of wallets, they could be hitting their 90. So I know a lot of people wanted that donation endpoint so they could put all of it into one wallet so they don't have to worry about, like having ADA in there to pay transaction fees, that kind of stuff. But this is a really good reason not to, because if you have it in a whole bunch of different wallets, then you're going to get it. You might get it a little quicker than if you have it in one wallet and that wallet ends up getting it closer to the 90-day mark. So at Cardano says, I covet my little night lobsters, still mining, albeit with only one wallet. Have you watched the Sean Ryan, Michael Herrera interview? Is Michael Herrera the one who ran into the, according from his perspective, tier 1 guys who disarmed him and his buddies? Is that the one with the big hexagonal UAP in the Philippines right after some kind of a disaster? Is that the one? Anyone having trouble keeping up? Okay. Anyone having trouble keeping up with the scavenger mine? I'm behind on challenges now. Not sure if my PC can't still keep up. Yeah, very much so. My laptop using browser mining was definitely having trouble. The difficulty ratcheted up. Emmanuel Herrera says, I'm tired, Grandpa. Cardano at heart is a layer 0 blockchain. It's the network that is the most powerful asset. It's so overlooked. That's very true. That's a very good way to describe it. For a while there, crypto guys were loving to talk about layer 0, and they all wanted to claim that their blockchain was layer 0. But the blockchain that has the best claim to be layer 0, at least with some amount of expressivity, so you have to exclude Bitcoin, is Cardano. When looking through proposals on Project Catalyst, you being a DRep, what priorities are you looking for in those proposals? Adoption use case. Oh man. So Catalyst is. I should do a whole video on Catalyst. Catalyst is. I don't even want to broach the topic. Catalyst is a complex topic, and we should probably talk about it at some point. But Catalyst is a difficult topic. I'll put it that way. Mr. iWeb Code DMS, the big unknown as I see it is if all these chains are included as potential paths for fulfilling intent. Okay, so let's get further on in the video. Let's get further on in the video so we can actually get to that point before we address that. Okay. So Charles also talks about cooperation, right? So he loves to use his medical records example to talk about this. And originally, when he first started talking about this, he didn't label it as cooperation so explicitly, but I think that's really what it is. So he mentions this scenario. You go on vacation somewhere, you're in Bermuda, and something happens to you. You have to go to the hospital, and the vacation hospital needs your medical records from your primary care physician back home. But your primary care physician, it's hard to do that transfer of medical records because your PCP just gets a request from somebody somewhere. Maybe it's a hospital in Bermuda, and that PCP doesn't really know if he can trust the requester. So Charles puts out that midnight is made to fill that trust void and be the coordination layer between different actors who find it hard to coordinate on something like that has to happen. So and then he comes to the thing that a lot of people are really excited about right now, and that's agents and agentic commerce. We covered the X402 standard, if I got the number right there, 402, that Coinbase collaborated on so that agents can pay each other sort of natively on the internet. Charles points out that with the layer of privacy and identity provided by Midnight, you can have all this agentic commerce going on. And the problem with the agentic commerce is that the giant tech entities that are going to be controlling all the AI behind the agents is going to be getting this giant amount of data. They're already getting it. Charles points out that Sam Altman doesn't really need to have all that data for you to do the things with with the agents based on his AI that you want to do. And with the privacy and identity provided by Midnight, you can still engage, you can still have agents engage in that agentic commerce on your behalf without Sam Altman getting all that data. So he gives a long example about trying to buy a hat for his bullet ant adventure in the Amazon, and how much easier it would have been if he had, just an AI agent to do all that research for him about what kind of hat he should buy. But at the same time, Sam Altman doesn't need to know you're on the way to the Amazon. Sam Altman doesn't need to know your hat size, right? He doesn't need any of this stuff. And the privacy and identity provided by Midnight can solve that problem. So then he gets to tokenomics, which is a familiar topic in crypto and kind of an interesting one that we've been talking about in the comments right now in Midnight. So we just did the glacier drop, and he's like, the whole purpose of this was to have a fair distribution. He wanted to kill off, any chance of there being Ponzi-nomics involved, and he wanted to kill off any possibility of this turning into the very familiar VC game we're familiar with, both of which, Ponzi-nomics and the whole VC thing, can be ruiners of fair distribution. So they did the biggest airdrop ever that went to the holders of 95% of all the value of all crypto, which is a really interesting stat. The people who got the midnight airdrop actually hold 95% of all the value of all crypto. That's a pretty fair distribution. When you hit 95% of the holders of the value, pretty hard to say that's not fair. So here's where the tokenomics get interesting, and we're going to talk about dust, which is why it's in the title of this video and in the thumbnail. So they also wanted predictable pricing for the customers of the chain. So who are the customers of the chain? They're, us, but also businesses. And the businesses that are actually engaging in commerce on the chain, they need a reliable way to predict their cost of goods sold, their COGS, right? They need to be able to predict how much it's going to cost them to do the things they're doing on the midnight chain. And if you have this deflationary token, like a lot of blockchains have, we all know what happens with these deflationary tokens. One of the reasons we're here is because we love that they have these crazy parabolic highs, and we don't love that then they have these 90% drawdowns. That doesn't work if you need to predictably predict how much it's going to cost you to do your business on a chain like Midnight. So they have this dual token system, this very interesting dual token system with one deflationary token, the Night token, that's going to live on the public ledger, Cardano. Night, as almost everybody knows, is a Cardano native token. Then you have a gas token, which is produced by that deflationary token, and it is not deflationary. This is the dust token. That will not be deflationary. And here's the thing that I think maybe some people don't realize. The reason why it's going to produce predictable pricing of the network services is because the dust generation function can vary to promote stable and predictable prices, right? If the dust token, if each of your night tokens produce the exact same amount of dust, despite how much demand for dust there was on the network, which is, hopefully going to be related to the volume of use of the network, then the price of dust, if the demand side of the curve goes up and the supply side does not, freshman year economics 101, the price of the dust token is going to go up. So what's going to happen instead is that the supply will scale to meet the demand, to keep the price of doing business on midnight the same. So that's what's going on with the dust token. So, and we'll skip around and look at some of the, we'll go back and look at some of the light paper and the tokenomics paper to help explain this a little bit. So as you know, the unshielded token night has a fixed supply and deflationary policy. This is the one that would produce very unpredictable cost of doing business on midnight. Midnight's transaction energy, I actually like calling it the energy token rather than the gas token. Gas token sounds super old and, it's not very high tech. It's not very futuristic. I think energy token sounds cooler, even though I'm sure we're all just going to call it a gas token. But energy token is a great way to call this. So dust is a capacity access shielded resource used to facilitate transactions on the network and ensure the transaction metadata is protected to prevent correlation. So it's important to note that the dust token is going to be private. People aren't going to be able to see what's going on with the dust token. Not only is it going to make pricing predictable, but it's also going to be private. It's going to live on the privacy chain while night is going to be public and live on the public chain. This is also important. So people, the general public, people just surveying the ledger aren't going to be able to tell how much you're spending, what's going on with the dust tokens. So this is what we learned in the light paper though. Dust behaves like energy in the physical world as it decays over time. That is, it has value but cannot store value. It is not a store of value. However, it is continuously replenished as a pool of night generates energy to maintain a proportional supply. Dust cannot be transferred, thus addressing regulatory concerns that are commonplace with shielded tokens or assets. The intent of this design is maintain the predictability of fees. And then in the tokenomics paper, they had a little more detail even. So this is the section about dust, the dust resource. Notice they're calling it a resource, not even an asset. I mean, assets can be resources, but I like I like everything that goes into thinking about it as a resource. So dust allows for transactions to take place without exposing users' metadata. Wallet addresses and transaction details like values and timestamps are not disclosed. Dust is consumed when used, meaning it is burned. It does not cycle back into circulation. When it's used as energy, it goes away. It doesn't just go to somebody who then spends it on something else. Dust shielding and burn reduce minor extractable value likelihood since attackers cannot identify potential victims. So they can't tell who you are, making it harder for them to engage in MEV. Dust is continually generated by night balances in perpetuity. This property encourages more active participation and interaction with the network, potentially leading to a more vibrant ecosystem. So decay, a dust balance decays when disassociated from the night address that generated it, meaning it cannot act as a store of value. So you're not going to be sending your night to somebody else and them just stockpiling the night. Even in these scenarios, people are thinking about selling, their night tokens to some business who needs them to do their business on the network. That business is not going to be like stockpile dust tokens to spend them later, because the dust balance decays when disassociated from the night address that generated it. So this is also important to note. It is not a deflationary asset. As it is generated continually and indefinitely, there is no limit to how much dust can be generated over time. However, the available supply at any given point in time is capped by the number of night tokens generating dust. It's non-transferable. Dust cannot be transferred between addresses, meaning it can either be bought or sold, insulating it from supply shocks and volatility. This property strengthens its utility solely as a resource to power transactions while also addressing regulatory aspects that are commonplace with shielded assets. There is no fixed one-to-one parity between the dust and night supplies. The supply of the resource that is available at a given moment fluctuates with usage and network dynamics. So this is dust. Dust is not going to be like the, secondary token in a lot of ecosystems. Okay. So, we're going to get to the intent part soon. Let's go. Drunky Ned, let's go. Let's go. Adam Olson says, I tried to give you love on episode 177, the Layerverse. For some reason, it's not showing up. I was trying to give you some love, especially if it gets to 1 million views. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. I'll go and look and see if there's something going on there. I'll go back and look in the comments and see if I can see your comment. 95% is kind of mind blowing. I agree with that. It's kind of wild that an airdrop happened anywhere in crypto that went to 95, the holders of 95% of the value. That's kind of wild. Multiple browser people are our new VCs. kind of true. Whoever is mining with like 6,000 different bots is, they are a little more powerful in terms of their night holdings for sure. TradFi can barely talk Bitcoin language, night and dust. I just don't see a Jamie Dimon, Larry Fink talking that language. I'm gonna wait and see, but mine just in case. Yeah, I mean, we're so much further out on the risk curve than those guys, than the current position of those guys. Like Larry Fink and Jamie Dimon, like, I mean, they're where I was in 2012. Like, I had the same risk appetite as them in 2012. So they're a ways back. Dust output can be directed. So theoretically, someone running a dApp that needs more can rent dust from people. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously what we've been told is going to be the case. I mean, otherwise we're not just I mean, that's the utility, that's the value to us of this dust generation thing. Obviously we can use it for our own transactions. But what you're describing is my understanding of the value to us of dust. So, okay, back to Charles. So Charles also talks about network effects, and this is actually kind of one of the most interesting parts of the video to me. So, what we worry about with Cardano, I don't worry. Like, given our experience in Cardano, I don't worry about IOG coming up with the right tech. I've never worried like, oh, IOG isn't going to try hard enough on the tech side. Like, they're going to make risky decisions, on the tech side that are going to lead to, a lack of robustness of the network. Like, that's not what jumps to my brain when I think about IOG. But what I think probably does come up for a lot of us is, are they going to be able to do the adoption thing? So Charles had a whole part of this whiteboard video where he talked about network effects, and it basically posed the question: how do you get people to leave their home chains and come to midnight? So we've got all these people, the holders of 95% of the value in crypto. How are we actually going to get them to come over to midnight and use it? So the answer is, they're not even really going to feel like they're using midnight because of capacity exchange, what Charles calls capacity exchange. And, this is sort of akin to Babel fees a little bit. So Charles says ETH and BTC people can pay gas fees with their home currencies, and then dust will be used to pay the transaction fees, while the holder of the dust gets the Ether or BTC. So this is what Bindocam is referring to in his comment right there. So they won't even feel like they left Ethereum or Bitcoin. For them, and this goes a little bit toward the intention stuff that we're going to talk about in a second, that was referenced earlier in the comments. For them, they're just going to know that they wanted to do something and it happened and they paid in Ether or Bitcoin. They're not even going to have to confront the cognitive dissonance of, being Bitcoin maximalists and using another chain. If, this comes off as seamlessly as I think we're all hoping. So Midnight is going to be, and this is a really interesting part actually. Midnight is going to be observing the totality of these other networks, like the Ethereum network. And it'll just create a proof through folding. It'll just create a proof of the whole Ethereum chain to understand what's what over there. So obviously, if you're going back and forth, there's different approaches to going back and forth between chains. There's the kind of bridging approach. And what Charles is talking about here is something a little more magical, where Midnight is just going to create a proof that represents the totality of the Ethereum chain, and you won't have to worry about trusting bridge operators and that kind of thing. So in this sense, Midnight will be like a universal monitoring layer, monitoring all these other chains. Then Midnight and these other chains can trustlessly communicate without a bridge. So this is pretty big. I think if you've been around the channel for a while, I have relentlessly made fun of bridges for being a part of the robbery forest. It's like, what's worse than being in the robbery forest? It's like going over a bridge in the robbery forest. That's the only way it gets worse. It's like the robbery forest and you're going over a bridge. That's the worst thing you could do inside the robbery forest, which is like the worst thing you could do in crypto. And here it looks like if this works like Charles is describing, it looks like they've figured out a way to just remove that whole part of it. So then he talked about Minotaur, multi-resource consensus. So Minotaur sounded kind of wild when that paper and when Charles first started talking about Minotaur, it sounded kind of wild, right? Like obviously, sounded good, it makes very valid points that whether you're using proof of work or proof of stake or proof of X, any other things, that's pretty much just how you pick which validator gets to validate the block, right? It's not the actual consensus mechanism. It's not how you get everybody to agree that that's the correct next entry in the ledger. It just decides who gets to enter that next entry in the ledger. So it's a little bit it's a little bit less of a big deal to do Minotaur, right? Than people would think. I think a lot of Bitcoin people try to pretend like there's this gigantic difference, in proof of work versus proof of stake, but it really only decides which validator gets to do the next entry. So Charles says, with Minotaur multi-resource consensus, you can have arbitrary consensus algorithms, and he imagines this question: what if the validators of the blockchains that got the airdrop also all got to contribute to the operation of the blockchain? Then you've got cooperative consensus to go along with the cooperative economics that hopefully we're achieving right now with the airdrop and the scavenger mine and the lost and found period and the melt of the glacier. So this is I don't feel like I have a lot of details at this point on how Minotaur is going to look on the ground, how this multi-resource consensus is actually going to look, and how these validators, the other blockchains, are actually going to be involved. I don't think I have the details on this, but I'm very curious to learn how that's actually going to look when we get to see it in practice. Okay. Currently, Adam says currently the IOG video has less than 4,000 views. Am I that much of a nerd? Oh yeah, I'm showing maybe I haven't refreshed this recently, but it's definitely showing 3,610 views, which is not much. One thing that has not been clarified, at least that I know of, whether or not Midnight will privatize sends and receives of the other chains it wants to involve, such as BTC, ETH, Sol, etc. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question either. Obviously the night tokens, the night that is, flying around as energy for these transactions, obviously that part is going to be shielded, but these are interesting details and I don't know the answer to these questions. Okay. Oh, J. Cole. S- Skolder is mentioning. Are you talking about J. Cole? That's an interesting reference. Okay. Do you think this is a make or break moment when it comes to midnight for Cardano to turn around its reputation? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think it is a make or break moment. So I think what I'm really thankful for, what I'm really grateful for, is that Charles was willing to pivot because, you know, the thing about this dude is he is not going to lie down and take defeat. I love that he was willing to pivot. He could have just dug his heels in and been like, Cardano's great. We didn't make mistakes with Cardano. Cardano is great. It's good enough. We did a great job. The world just needs to pivot to come to us to understand how great Cardano is. Instead, he's like, okay, what can we do? What crazy thing can we do? How can we pivot to go meet the world where the world is instead of just waiting for the world to come to meet us? He pivoted and said, okay, what's the craziest thing we could do? What's the craziest thing we can do um, that would be so attractive to all of the other big blockchains that they would have to come meet us? And he did that thing. I'm super grateful he this because a person could have taken an egotistical approach and just decided, nope, what we had was perfect. We don't need to do anything else. The world just needs to come and meet us. It would have been very easy for somebody in Charles's position to do that. So, okay. It may be the case that Midnight is only capable of privatizing sends and reserves of Midnight itself while making the moving for their crypto public all the time. I'm not even sure how the other crypto is, these other blockchains are going to operate, vis-a-vis Midnight. I'm not even sure how this is going to work. I'm very interested to know though. Midnight launching in the bear market is an automatic hodl. Let's go. Forerunner. I think you're right. Like I kind of like I was like, man, when I realized that the Midnight, even though their timing was planned well, was gonna be launching during not a great time. Yeah, at first I was like, man, nightmare for Midnight. But you're right. Actually, it'll cause probably a lot more people to hodl. If we were in just like a crazy bull market, probably a lot more people would sell for sure. Isn't Midnight an opportunity for regulatory capture because it enables disclosure? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is, except it's going to happen anyways. Like those dexes, like you're not going to be able to be a dex doing business in North America and be trading synthetics in the future. Like that's not a thing that's going to happen. So those guys they're either going to be outlaws or they're going to have to comply a little bit. At least Midnight is has that duality, shielded and unshielded. So we can kind of have it both ways. I think that's the best we can hope for, actually. Mallow, thank you for joining. D9U says boo. Oh, spent hundreds of millions of dollars and we just gave it away for free. Oh, okay. So that's at 105.57. Thanks for finding that at Cardano. Appreciate it. So I'll have to go back and re-listen to that and see if there's a little more context so we can see exactly what he's talking about. So let's get to this intention part. Let's get to this intention thing that people are talking about. So obviously we have so Charles is sort of dividing the world up. It's not obvious, but Charles is dividing the world up into declarative and procedural. So he illustrates this point by saying, "Hey, if I tell you that we're going to, I want you to meet me um in Chicago, a week from tomorrow, that's just declarative. Like, meet me in Chicago a week from tomorrow is very declarative. Like, this is the end result. This is the outcome I want. A procedural way of accomplishing the same thing would be to say, hey, I want you to jump on a train at exactly this time at this train station and ride to Chicago, where you will then take an Uber to this location. That would be a procedural way of describing it. He says crypto is very procedural. It's sort of like you want to provide liquidity to, a DEX. You got to do it exactly procedurally how they prescribe. You can't just say, yeah, I want to be a liquidity provider for this. You can't just declare that and have it happen. You have to be the way to accomplish that is very procedural, because smart contracts are very procedural. I said earlier, smart contracts was probably the wrong way to describe them, because it gives people the wrong idea about what they do. Locks, procedural locks, are what they really are, because they just provide this very strict procedure for being able to move assets in and out of addresses. That's all they do. They just open doors for assets to leave an address. That's what they do. It's all very procedural. So that's not really what people want, though. People just want to do things on blockchains. They don't really want to follow complex procedures, right? They just want to buy an asset. They just want to provide liquidity. They just want to make a loan. They just want to be the borrower of a loan. They don't really care about the procedure. And they don't even care when we're talking about onboarding the mainstream. They're not even going to care where it settles. They don't care if it settles on Ethereum mainnet. They don't care if it settles on Cardano. They just don't want to be front run. They want to pay as little in fees as possible. They don't want to be victims of the robbery forest. And then they just want that asset. They want the loan. They want to make the loan. They want to provide liquidity. They have an intention, and that's the important part. The procedural part, they just do because they have to. So the problem is that if you try to create a system where a declarative system in a blockchain, you will get front run, because the whole thing with mempools and front running and MEV and sandwich attacks is, as soon as you're in the mempool, the validators who are going to engage in minor extractable value and sandwich attacks, they know your intention. They know you want to buy or sell, and that's how they can sandwich attack you. So the beauty of a privacy-based chain is that you can be declarative. You can just say, I want to buy this asset. And then through the privacy features of a privacy chain, you can shield that intention as it's being carried out on the blockchain. So this is a really interesting thing. We could have this whole paradigm shifting change where we go from this very procedural crypto world to a more intention driven crypto world. So Midnight can be the intention layer of the internet by shielding your intentions and trustlessly routing your transaction wherever is most optimal. If we say that the mainstream isn't going to care where their transaction settles, Midnight can route it to wherever is most optimal. It might be Ethereum, it might be Cardano, it might be Bitcoin, it might even be a centralized exchange, it might be Kraken. Maybe for some reason Kraken is the only place where you can get this asset. If you're a mainstream person coming into crypto, you don't care. You just want the asset. You don't care about where it comes from. You just don't want to end up as a victim of something like front running or some kind of robbery. So Charles ended his talk by emphasizing fairness for all. He said, this really does feel like sort of, this dude's life work. Like, this is Charles's life work. I don't know if we're going to see Charles in another 10 years come up with, a whiteboard video 3.0 for Gen 5 of crypto. Maybe that'll happen. But I think for now, some part of him knows this is his life work. Like Cardano was the preparation, and Cardano 2.0, which is Cardano and Midnight together, this is his life work. And he said, this is really all about fairness, providing fairness for people. TradFi and DeFi will just become Fi as long as it's fair. And that's kind of, I think that he's sort of citing that as the sort of ultimate manifestation of crypto. So really, really good. This was, I think, everything a lot of us hoped it would be. So I think this was everything a lot of us hoped this would be. It's really Charles trying to do all the stuff, we sort of always knew he talked about. I mean, remember the early days of Cardano? What did we talk about? We talked about all of the Africa stuff, creating a more level economic playing field for the world. I think this is him trying to put all the pieces together and actually do that thing we always talked about in Cardano. This is him trying to flip crypto and create that original thing that crypto was always about. Last night, the video was called Back to Basics. I think that's what this is. This is him trying to get back to the fundamentals of crypto with this whole thing. He also had this post where he asked, what should we call the sort of citizens of midnight, the people involved, the midnight community? And people had some pretty creative answers. Immediately, I saw this one, Night Riders. I thought this was actually very, very good name. Night Riders would be pretty good. There's definitely a huge amount of 80s nostalgia for people who were alive then. However, I think if we tried to call ourselves Night Riders, immediately people would mock us as Nut Riders. Immediately, people would start calling us Charles's Nut Riders. So maybe Night Riders, even though that would be a great name, the Nut Rider thing would be a problem. I noticed another very popular post was Night Owls, and Charles even responded to that. Somebody said owls, and Charles said night owls. Obviously, night owls was a big theme on this channel in the last cycle. There were comments almost every single video about night owls because of partially just because of how late the videos came out in the Western Hemisphere. So obviously, I'm not opposed to the night owls name for the ecosystem. But what does everybody else think? What does everybody think the community should be called in Cardano? I'm sure a lot of you saw this thread. Yes, these are all better than the Grayscale ADA fund. I swear to God, they're trying to sabotage us with that. Terrible. If the asset Midnight is frozen, then how can we trade it to give a 50-cent price, as Charles posted on X? Brija 7773. I don't know about a 50-cent price. Like, I mean, I'm the person who's never I'm the person who's is this a Monty Python reference? That's pretty good, very creative. I'm the person who's never going to speculate on price because I think I don't think any of us really know. But I will say I wouldn't kick a 50-cent price out of bed, but I'm definitely not expecting it. I'm definitely not expecting a 50-cent price anytime soon. That would be incredible. Charles is an optimistic guy. He's an ambitious, optimistic guy. So I haven't seen the post you're referencing. I don't know if he actually said 50 cents, but if he did, I would just say, this is Charles's baby. And of course he's going to be optimistic, but I would be very, that would be great. I would accept that. I'll put it that way. Yeah. And I mean, that's another thing. He actually didn't talk about it in this video that I caught. But Rulo makes a good point. He has talked very recently about how RealFi is going to be a huge thing with Midnight. And John O'Connor is still in Africa. Dude's been doing the RealFi thing in Africa all this time. I remember we heard like a year ago or some time ago. Don't quote me on the timing, but at some point, like a year ago or 2 years ago or something like that, Charles mentioned that sort of John O'Connor's operation over there was going to be spun off into its own thing. It would be RealFi. And it's looking like that's going to be a big piece of what's going on in Midnight. It's going to be a big thing launching on Midnight. I'll put it that way. I was super happy to hear that. I was very, very happy to hear that because I think that was captivating for a lot of us in the early days of Cardano. The idea of a blockchain ecosystem doing something like that felt that impactful. So I was so happy when I heard Charles saying that never died. They've just been working on it, and it's going to be a thing on Midnight. So this is a really good point. It's not over. It's not over. Okay, Severe Tom Cardiac voted Nighthawks. The Nighthawks. Nighthawks is pretty good. I like at Cardano. I like Star Lords. Star Lords would be really funny. It would definitely date us as Night Riders would date us. Star Lords would be really funny until we all got a little too old and the kids had no idea what we were talking about. It's super funny right now because we all saw the movies, but once kids came around who hadn't seen it yet, they would definitely make fun of us if we called ourselves Star Lords, which also would have its own charm. Oh, I remember this movie. Oh yeah, I remember this movie. Wait, I remember a show called Nighthawk with Rutger Hauer. I don't remember Stallone being in it. What are you saying? Stallone was in that movie as well? I don't remember Stallone being a part of that movie. I remember Rutger Hauer, but I mean, it's a long time ago. I was a kid when that came out. So, Parker Lewis can't lose. Parker Lewis can't lose. I remember when Parker Lewis can't lose was on TV, but what is the Parker Lewis reference here? I agree. I would like to learn more about palm economy, to be honest with you. I would like to learn more about it. Nighthawks. Yeah, Nighthawks is pretty good. It's almost a little too like self-congratulatory. Billy D. Williams. Billy D. Williams was in everything back in the day. Star Wars. He was a big actor. Billy D. Williams was a big actor in the 80s. Charles. Yeah, I mean, like I've said it many times on the channel, like a big part of the Cardinal bet I would wager for a lot of people was betting on the jockey, not the horse. I mean, the horse was great. I like the looks of the horse, but you could tell when Charles gave that whiteboard 1.0 video, just like this one, you could tell this dude does not want to lose. He will do anything to not lose. I mean, this guy reinvented his whole blockchain and added it on, built it on, grafted it on to his original blockchain because he doesn't want to lose. He refuses to lose. I will always bet on a guy like that who does not want to lose. I will always bet on them. Edge Lords. What if we were called the Edge Lords? it's like because we're at the edge of midnight. We're the Edge Lords. Lando Calrissian. That's right, Lando Calrissian. I honestly have not watched those super old movies like probably since the 80s. I guess maybe I watched them once in the like late 90s again, but it's been a long time since I watched those. Hasselhoffers. See, I like the absurdity of something like this. And then we could get David Hassel. I think he's still alive, right? He's still alive. We could get David Hasselhoff to start showing up to midnight events. That'd be incredible. That'd be incredible. No, Nighthawks. Binocamp says Nighthawks sounds edgy. Laugh out loud. It wasn't my suggestion. Nighthawks. Yeah, Nighthawks sounds very fierce. I feel like we would get mocked for having such a fierce name. But it is awesome. It is awesome though. Yeah, I mean, like yeah, I think okay, so here's my theory on this. I think if you're in crypto only in the bull markets, your average age is much lower, right? I feel like the average age of crypto people in the like super pumping bull markets is like a much lower age. And if you're still around at times like this, especially if you're still, paying attention to what's happening in blockchains, then the average age goes up of the group, I think, for sure. Probably just because we're a little more patient. Probably just a little more patient, a little less trend driven. And we could call ourselves the entering dragons. And then Jason Scott Lee would show up to our conferences. That'd be good too. I'd be in favor of that. I don't even know what happened to that guy. That was a great movie, and he did a great job in that movie, though. That was a fantastic movie at the time. Yeah, the car was named Kit. The car was named Kit. We also refer to kit cars as like a car, often back in the old days, it'd be like a car that looked like a car. It really wasn't, like it'd be like a Shelby Cobra, but it really just had like a small Volkswagen engine inside, but somebody made like a body kit, that made it look like a Shelby Cobra. We also called those kit cars back in the day. There's also another type of kit cars that are more valid, that don't have that sort of like sense of illegitimacy, but a lot of the kit cars I would see when I was a kid were more like what I just described. Okay, I am old too. I am old too, Binocam. I'm not afraid to mention that. Okay, Beamer House. Thank you for joining. We're just talking about cars. In fact, I know Beamer could be a reference to motos as well, but this bull market sucks. I am with you. I'm with you, Beamer House. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not afraid to say it. This bull market does suck. Adam Olsen, Bruce Lee. Yeah, Jason Scott Lee played Bruce Lee in the movie, right? Have I got his name right? I think I've got his name right. I think his name was Jason Scott Lee, and he played Bruce Lee in that movie because Bruce Lee had already passed away, of course. Night Stalkers. Just kidding. Night Stalkers is kind of awesome, though. It's kind of awesome, but yeah, it does have some negative. I mean, it doesn't have negative. It has negative connotations in the crime world, but less so in the like military tactical sense. But yeah, that would be the funny. I mean, that would be if we went with something that was so aggressive like that. It would almost be funny because it would be so obvious that people would try to not mock us over it. Kind of like the Knight Rider thing. If Knight Rider, it's so obvious how people would mock us with it. It might actually be funny because it'd be so obvious how we'd be mocked over that. Kind of the same thing with Night Stalkers and Nighthawks and all these kind of like very, very sort of like fierce, kind of self-congratulatory names. Maybe I'm an unserious person because I gravitate more towards the less serious, less fierce names. Maybe that means I'm unserious. Yes, this Severed Tom Cardiac says, yes, this so-called bull market does indeed suck. But if you believe it is an opportunity to keep accumulating, that's what I'm doing. Yeah, I mean, this is when this kind of stuff would happen when I'm fiat mining. This is like a dream. I would love I love this kind of stuff to happen when I'm fiat mining because it's just better DCAs, which is my whole goal. I think my whole goal since 2018 has been DCAing into Cardano. So every time this kind of thing rolled around when I was just fiat mining, I was super happy, yeah, to get the sell, get the discount price. Okay, Brian Presnell says this whole night versus dust thing makes me think of the red dust from the movie Dune, Spice, maybe Spice Sniffers. See, I kind of gravitate more towards names like this because if you called yourself Spice Sniffers, nobody's gonna make fun of you because it's self-mocking already. Nobody's gonna make fun of you. Midnight Syndicate. Yeah, some people offered up. I think Charles originally offered up something like this involving the word syndicate. And it's also like, to me, it's like a little too slick. That's a little too slick. I feel like people would mock us for sure. Yep, definitely. I think the average age during the bear market is definitely a little higher for sure. Adam Olson says 1973. Night Bearers. Night Bearers. That's kind of an interesting name, Night Bearers, because we are definitely bearing. It's very descriptive. We are bearing night if we're part of that community for sure. Nocturnals, shades, something I don't know. Shades. Yeah, I don't think we want to be shady. Nocturnal is like too. I feel like nocturnal is an adjective, and I kind of want to be a noun. I kind of want us to be nouns instead of adjectives. You know what I mean? I know nocturnals is being I think it was wasn't this like a type of a classification of characters in some recent fiction or something, like something in some comic universe or something, but to me it's like that's like an adjective. That's my problem with it. The Eclipse Collective. That's yeah, that's like very exotic. That's a very exotic way to describe it, I think. Yep. Yep. Yep, definitely. Definitely. I would say crypto kind of doesn't not not a lot of people in I would say the crypto is not the most tactical. Like the Venn diagram between mill and tactical stuff and crypto is not is it's not the biggest intersection in the world, I'll put it that way. It's definitely there, but it's not like a huge intersection, people who would understand. So knighthood. Yeah, yeah, I think that's probably a good way to describing it. During the bull market, you get people of all ages, and people who are younger um are less risk averse, and but they also are going to bail fast. They're going to bail fast when the trend's over. They're going to get out of there. They're going to have a shorter time horizon, and they're going to bail when they see that on the short time horizon. They're going to be less patient. They're going to bail and get out of there. And I think we are a little more responsible. We're thinking a little more long term. So I think we're more willing to wait out the bad times. I think scavengers. This would have like a hard Mad Max kind of theme. That's pretty good. I kind of like scavengers. Nobody's gonna mock. I mean, it's kind of self-deprecating by itself, so they can't really mock us because we're already being self-deprecatory. Night Runners is pretty good. Night Runners is good. Um, it sort of like sounds like Night Riders. It sounds cool like Night Riders, but they won't call us that other name, so that's pretty good. Uh, okay. Yeah, Flying Hambone is definitely on the younger end of this crowd. So I think this whiteboard video was just as good as I hoped it would be. I think the thing that was remarkable about it was you could really see how excited Charles is, um, how passionate he is about this. And he's like genuinely optimistic and excited. Like it really comes through in the video. You can tell this dude is excited. He knows that this might be his life's work. He knows that this might be it. This might be the crowning achievement of his life's work. I'm sure if you asked him, he would say, no, 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 no. I think I'm going to build, many more things that will be meaningful. This will not be my life. I think he would be optimistic as he always is. But, I think some part of him knows this might be his life's work, and he's very optimistic about it. I think that was one of the best parts of it. It really came through. He's a passionate dude. The thing about very passionate people is they're at their best when they're very optimistic. And this was a very, very optimistic Charles. And I think there's a lot there to be optimistic about. It's a tall order. It's very ambitious. It's very ambitious for a bunch of broke knights, as Beaver House points out, because we kind of are that right now, given these prices. We are kind of a bunch of broke knights, but it's very ambitious. So the question is not like, even though intention was a big part of the video, the question now is not so much intentions. I feel like after this whiteboard video, we know exactly what the intention is. It's just execution, especially that, you know, what did we call it? The network effect section. Can we execute on the network effect piece? Is the system well architected enough in that direction to execute on the network connection piece? Daniil says, anyone is getting error contacting BlockFrost API, choosing a destination on Brave. Yeah, anybody who has experience with Brave in that respect, let Daniil know. But yeah, I think this was the perfect whiteboard 2.0 video. So thank you to Charles for producing a great video and for being authentically excited, passionate, and optimistic about this. I think it gets all of us fired up. I think after that video, a lot of people are going to be more excited about Midnight than they were before the video. So big thanks to Charles for making that video and making it so good. I hope everybody has had a great week. I think this really is a fork in the road for all of Cardano. We're about to become something different. And I don't know if it's a caterpillar becoming a butterfly or what it is, but this is definitely a big fork in the road. And I think we're all kind of going down the same fork. I think we're all kind of going in the same direction. Cardano is largely, for most of us, is going to become something brand new. And I feel optimistic about it. I feel like we're going in a good direction. I think things are going to be good. When all this manifests, I don't know, but I hope it's soon because I'm excited. I hope everybody had a great week. I hope you're looking forward to a great weekend. Thank you for being here, and I will talk to you soon.